what's the use of two strong legs if you only run away? And what use is the finest voice when you have nothing good to say? What good is strength and muscle if you only push and shove? And what's the use of two good ears when you can't hear those you love? It's not just what you're born with, it's what you choose to bear. And it's not how big your share is, but how much you can share. And it's not the fights you dreamed of, but those you really fought. It's not what you've been given, it's what you do with what you've got. Yeah, it's not just what you're born with, it's what you choose to bear. And it's not how big your share is, but how much you can share. And it's not the fights you dreamed of, but those you really fought. It's not what you've been given, it's what you do with what you've got.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to Seeds of Revolution. Today we have a wonderful author interview with Kitty Stryker. Kitty is the author of an upcoming book, Love Rebels: How I Learned to Burn It Down Without Burning Out by Thornapple Press on October 17th, 2025. Kitty, welcome to Seeds of Revolution. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So I guess the best way to start, because this book is part sort of how-to manual, part memoir, if you could just tell our audience a little bit about yourself, how you became a love rebel, what love rebel means to you, and maybe a brief synopsis of what put you on the path to writing this book.
Sure. Well, I grew up an activist. My mother was an anarchist. My dad is a well-meaning liberal, bless him.
Aren't all liberals well-meaning?
I mean, pushed constantly further and further to the left over the years, which is nice. It's a nice change of pace. Um, so when I was small, we used to go defend abortion clinics from being threatened by Christian organizations. And we would march in Take Back the Night rallies. I had a little pin that I would wear that says, I'm a mini feminist. I took karate and did model mugging courses. And so I was just like always really invested in activism. I think when I was younger, especially feminist activism, though that quickly expanded into environmental activism and then into politics at large. I came out as queer when I was maybe 14 and was very, very supported by my parents, which was fantastic. So I didn't grow up with a sense of shame about who I was. If anything, I grew up with a sense that the world needed to mold itself to my expectations rather than the other way around, which is a mixed bag. Um,
That's
but
interesting. I wonder if that may be part of the influence of your anarchist mother, because as anarchists, I feel like sometimes we take a page from Emma Goldman and insist that the world has to mold itself to us, not the other way around. That's a
oh,
very anarchist
absolutely.
perspective.
Yeah, and I grew up in Massachusetts, like down the street from her ice cream parlor. So like very much a part of my upbringing. Also, my mom loved Ursula K. Le Guin. That was a big influence. So very much like everything I was raised with was this idea that the only thing you have control over is yourself, but you have control over yourself. And therefore, you should use that to do things in the world. Hopefully, great things, but anything really would be a start. So there was that sense of ownership, I guess, over the way the world around me was, which I think that was a little bit hard at times. I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself to be the one to change the world, and very quickly realized that that was not something any one person could do. So that was definitely a struggle, which is actually a huge reason why I ended up writing this book, because I think I have fallen into the cycle of burning out over and over again and trying to find a way to be the activist I want to be a community pillar, while also being my friend and playing Dungeons and Dragons and sleeping on a regular basis.
Since you mentioned Dungeons and Dragons, I am contractually obligated to ask you chaotic neutral, chaotic good, definitely not lawful good because you're an anarchist. I'm gonna guess chaotic neutral.
I mean, I usually play chaotic neutral characters. I would
Yes.
actually be one of those annoying people who would argue that lawful is about whether you follow consistently ideals rather than the law.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think you could, I mean, I would feel embarrassed to identify as lawful anything, but I think in terms of my consistency, I might lean a little more lawful in that I have these values that have been my ethics ever since I was small that have been very, very, very consistent.
That's actually a really interesting remark, and I'm not even kidding. I'd like to explore that further. Speaking of Dungeons and Dragons and lawful good, do you think that, and I know we're automatically going way off course, and we'll get back to the book momentarily, but your comment that lawful good should actually mean following a consistent set of principles instead of following the law. I know you and I are both from the United States, and we like to think that the American ideal, the American Constitution, is about following a set of principles. Do you think it was ever that? Or do you
No,
think that lawful good has always meant, in the context of the U.S. imperial project, following the quote unquote law?
I mean, I think it's always had a white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchy mindset, and it was never for everybody. And therefore, how principled can it be? um, I mean, I would say, like, I do think in terms of D&D, you can play a lawful character who is evil.
Yeah.
And so I think there is that, like, a great example is the NRA coming out and saying, "Hey, we aren't in support of anybody being banned from owning guns." That is consistent with their stated values. I will note that they said any lawful gun ownership. I suspect, judging from their history, they would love to find a way to make it unlawful for queer people to have guns, just as they were not keen on Black people from having guns. So, again, it's like not for everybody, but there is a weird consistency there. So, I mean, I think that people have always twisted the Constitution for their own ends, especially if that was in the service of preserving a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. So I don't know that I would consider them my values. Um, I mean, I have very mixed feelings about things like freedom of speech. I'm for it in many ways, and also I'm against hate speech. I don't think Nazis should get a platform. That is against free speech. So I guess that's my chaos part coming in, where it's like, it depends.
Well, let me get back to your book because I would need to strongly resist the temptation to make this entire interview a political D&D allegory, which
Oh, we
nobody
could
wants.
totally do that in a separate interview. I would love to.
Yeah, or maybe we'll collaborate on your next book, D&D and the politics of anarchism. It'll be great.
Oh,
Anyway,
that would be so good.
uh, but your book,
Yes.
what does Love Rebels mean, and why did you write it, and what do you hope people get out of it?
So I had this idea after doing a lot of activism after the first Trump election presidency, mid the first Trump presidency, where I was going out as a street medic almost every weekend and sometimes during the week as well. And I was exhausted.
Can you
Like,
what city this was?
oh, this was Berkeley, California, then and Oakland also, but mostly Berkeley. We had a real bad Proud Boy problem for a while there, and which became very publicized as the battles for Berkeley, which was wild. And I found myself feeling like I wanted to quit. Like, I really wanted to quit, and I didn't feel like I could because I didn't feel like there were enough people doing what I was doing to make me feel comfortable even taking some time off. And I was really fed up about that and also disappointed in myself. I felt like I should be able to push harder. I should be able to compartmentalize better. And I started thinking about there's got to be other activists who feel this way. And I thought initially it was going to be more of an anthology where different activists would talk about their experiences with this. And after Thornapple gave me a yes on the book, I had written 2 books on, or 3 books at that point on consent culture. And this was going to be the next one. I was like, I don't think this is a political climate where I feel comfortable naming other activists. Like, this is a political climate where anybody marginalized who is writing about activism runs some risk, a non-zero risk of having that seen as a manifesto. And I'm comfortable taking that on because I have a lot of privilege and can get away with it. But I don't feel comfortable asking other people to do that. So I pivoted pretty hard and then immediately had an emotional breakdown of who am I to write this book? Like, I've been doing activism for a long time, but I don't work at a nonprofit. I'm not like a public speaker about activism. I'm just out there doing it. We were talking before we started recording the podcast. I have a hard time even reading the theory. I try and I get the gist, but I'm more about lived experience. And so then I said, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to write this as a memoir and then offer tips, not prescriptively, but rather in a here's how you can begin to think about these things yourself and begin to unpack what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what kind of leadership styles feels supportive, what doesn't. How do you deal with conflict in your organization before it's a problem? How do you deal with it after it's a problem? Things that tend to make people feel overwhelmed as activists.
One of the things I really liked about your book, correct me if I'm wrong, but the sense I got from reading it was you were approaching this from here are some very hard-learned lessons that I have
Yeah,
gained over the course of my life that I'm offering to my friends and comrades to help them navigate the same treacherous waters that I've been down before.
for sure. And I'm hopeful. I think it comes across. I still can use this book.
Yeah.
While I was writing it, I was like, yeah, Kitty, I really need to take this advice that I'm giving to other people because I think that writing this book was a really interesting exercise in humility and acknowledging my own mistakes and acknowledging my own limitations, but also forgiveness and telling myself it's okay if you can't be out there every weekend. It's okay if you can't speak up on every issue that's happening. No one can. It's okay to focus your energies. It is more important to do something consistently than to do a huge thing and then never do activism again. Um, yeah. So I think that was kind of the reassurance that I wanted to give other people to help them feel less alone. And to, yeah, I guess make them feel seen. I think also I had a reaction reading other books about activism in particular. A lot of them are written by people who do this full time, who do work at nonprofits and are lobbyists. And that's awesome. I I think I would burn out so much faster if I was trying to do this as my full-time job on top of doing the activism. Um, but it's not the only way, you know. I really want people who are working 60-hour weeks to feel empowered to do something, even if it doesn't feel flashy, even if it doesn't mean going out to the protest. That's okay. There's so many things that need to be done. That is just one small portion. And I couldn't do my street medic work if I didn't have a whole community of people who are supporting me and feeding me and making sure my mental health was okay and making sure I took a shower and telling me to take time off. Like it's it's a whole community. It's not individualism. And it's not something, I think there's a real Protestant work ethic that kind of filters in to activism that makes you feel like, oh, if I just work harder, then this will become easier. That's not true. Like, and it's more like exercise where you can sort of gently begin to build up your resilience. But there's also a limit that you hit, that if you keep pushing past that limit, you are going to hurt something. And it is okay to understand that and to say, okay, I did good. I didn't go past my limit. Good for me, rather than feeling like that's some kind of moral failure.
What does the title Love Rebels refer to?
So I liked the idea of love rebels being like approaching activism from a place of love rather than necessarily a place of rage or despair. I mean, I think that rage and despair are wrapped up in love a
Can
lot.
be useful tools.
Absolutely. I think that under like balancing these energies is really helpful for me, and understanding that my anger and my hurt comes from a place of love for my community and a love for people, and my really genuine belief that most people don't want to hurt other people. And that is idealistic. And I mean, I'm currently working on a book about high control religions and cultures and how teenagers grow up within those environments. So I'm super, super aware that that I bump up against that a lot. But I really think that the answer to that is more agency and more information rather than trying to control other people, even if I think I have the right ideas. So that was part of it. Sorry, I remember that. So, love rebel is the idea of being a love rebel, being somebody who rebels from a place of love. But also, it's sort of a commandment, if you will, of like love rebels, love rebellion, love that aspect of people, love the people who are pushing back, even if they're pushing back in ways that are not your way of pushing back. That there are lots of different ways to do that. I am not a letter writer to my elected officials. I am much more likely to go to a protest. But I love the people who do that because I recognize that that is a part of a bigger puzzle too. So that's part of it, I guess, as well. So it's like, yeah, it's both a noun and a verb.
Speaking of activism coming from a place of love and being a love rebel, one of the phrases in your book that I really loved was this quote, pleasure itself is inherently revolutionary. And I really loved that quote and I loved that idea. And I was a little bit confused by it, to be honest. And I was hoping if you could expound on it because I think I agree with it, but I'm not sure. I also want to
Well,
make sure I understood what you mean by it.
totally. I think that for me, what is interesting, I grew, well, in my 20s, I would say. I was very much a part of like sex positive culture. And one of the things that I heard over and over again from the ethical slut was the idea that sex is good and pleasure is good for you. And I felt like, well, I mean, sex and pleasure are not necessarily the same thing. I'm pretty asexual, for example. So pleasure, I'm not averse, but it's not my top priority either. But I do think that it's important to make space for pleasure, whether that be the pleasure of sitting down after a long day of work or the pleasure of having a longer shower or eating some really nourishing food, maybe eating that food with a community of people that you love. That making time for pleasure is inherently important. It is what we are fighting for, is that time. Emma Goldman was very much about that. Like, I think I put the whole quote of hers, the one that gets shortened to like, if I can't dance, then it's not my revolution, and how wrong that is. Like, that's not what she said. And what she actually said was so much more interesting, because what she had actually, what she was saying, I think, was more, I, first of all, believed that a guy should not be mansplaining to me what anarchy is. Like, who the fuck are you? Which I respect. And also that, like, I'm fighting for everyone's right to beautiful, radiant things. That's what I want. I want people to have those things. The reason I'm doing this is because I see only some people get to have those things, and I think everyone should get to have them. And I find that so inspiring. Like, it can be really hard and tedious and upsetting work. And it's really important to remind yourself what you're doing all of this for and that it is valuable.
Are you familiar at all with William Morris, the 19th century British anarchist,
Yeah. Yeah.
socialist anarchist? He actually is more of a socialist than an anarchist. Um, William Morris had some great thoughts on beauty in the world. And for him, what was so valuable about non-capitalist labor was its potential to make the world more beautiful. And how
Yeah.
through that sort of non-capitalist labor, through more socialist labor or anarchist labor, you could really express yourself in a way that makes the world more beautiful around you. And one of the
Yeah.
biggest tragedies and shortcomings of capitalism was through Fordist production, industrialization, and now we have neoliberalism and offshoring of labor and blah, 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 blah. It just sucks all of the beauty out of production, out of creation, out of labor. Has that something that you felt in your own life, in your own work? Do you see the work of activism or the work of even writing as just an inherently aesthetically beautiful task, or is it more of a labor of love, if you will?
I mean, I think in its ideal form, I think once I hit the flow, then I really feel the beauty of it. I think the thing that I find a lot of beauty in is continuing to pace myself and do the labor even when it doesn't feel inherently beautiful.
Mhm.
And then managing to crest over that writer's block and being like, I've got it. There it is. That's what this is about. That is such a thrill every time. And I've done it a few times now, so I feel more confident when I'm in the writer's block section of writing a book and going, oh God, why am I doing this? Like, who am I to write this again? Like, this is hubris. I could say, you know what? You thought that last time and you wrote a pretty good book. So that's not guaranteed this time, but it's not guaranteed it's not going to be good. So maybe just write it. Just get it down. And then we'll fine tune it and it'll be the best thing it can be. I mean, tending my garden isn't fun every day. Sometimes it's really annoying, but seeing things grow and getting to feed people and getting to watch that whole process, be a part of a whole process, that feels beautiful, even when it's quiet, even when it's the sort of subtle day-to-day things.
There's another quote I wanted to ask you about. It relates not necessarily to the beauty of labor, but you were talking about, how you feel through your activism, whether it's gardening, whether it's being a street medic. And you write, one of the things I've had to learn from my own peace is that many people reach the ethical positions they hold not through logic, but through gut feeling, which I think is fantastic writing and also just axiomatic, um, because so many people hold so many opinions, whether it's COVID denialism, election denialism, Holocaust denialism, as it's happening in Gaza right now, that are unsupported by any sort of empirical research, that it must
Yeah.
be through gut and not through logic. I struggle, and maybe the reason I struggle with that is because what I was doing before this interview is I made the mistake of logging on to YouTube, and
Uh-oh.
the algorithm was feeding me videos of people who were resisting ICE, who were trying to, and sometimes successfully, kidnapping people off the streets of Los Angeles and other cities. I really struggle with the idea that those people believe that what they're doing is ethical. I struggle with the idea that somebody can get up at 4 in the morning, put on a mask, and then spend their day trying to kidnap Guatemalan grandmothers and rip them away from their family for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So while I appreciate your writing, and I think that that quote is a really wonderful quote, I want to push back on it a little bit, or at least ask you, how do you fit that sentiment into what we're seeing now, where the Gestapo has come to America? It is here. It is masked, and it is doing all it can to victimize the people who are the most exploited already.
I think what I see as a consistent thoroughfare between that and mass shootings and Christofascism is male entitlement.
Mm.
And also, I think a belief, a desperate need to believe that what you are doing is moral because you are doing it.
Can you talk a little bit more, if you would mind, about the male entitlement piece? Because I find that very interesting.
Yeah. So I think I mean, and I'm going to give this. I have been writing a lot about James Dobson in particular, but other sort of Christian fundamentalist evangelical groups that have influenced policy by pushing their ideas as the right and moral way, and also the historical way, which is completely inaccurate, that this is how America should be. The more that I engage with their writing, the more I see, oh, they really think that. Like they really believe that men should be in charge of the household, that that is the right and moral thing to do, that is outlined in the Bible, and everyone should follow that. Not only that, that if you aren't demanding other people do that, you are letting God down and you are failing these people by damning them to hell. It is a wild, I mean, I grew up pagan, so I didn't grow up with any of this. So when I look at this and I go, what? But I begin to see how this can all snowball, where if you're raised in a household that believes these things, and then you become a man and you get to enact your will on the world, I think there is a sense of, well, why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't I put the ring on? To quote Lord of the Rings. But like, there's this idea of like, oh well, I'm I'm not like that person. My way of doing this is righteous for whatever reasons I can outline. I see that sometimes in anarchist organizing too. Like I think, and I say male entitlement because I do think straight white male entitlements, very specifically, has a lessening hold on the United States, sort of in an overarching way. And with that comes a fear and a clenching and a desire to hold on to it for as long as you can and protect it from these outside sources. Like I do think that a lot of these people believe that they are they are ICE agents because they are protecting America from bad people. And in order for them to acknowledge that that might not be true, that would be an unraveling of so many of their core beliefs that it is terrifying. I experienced this talking to people who are in support of Israel as well. To acknowledge that what is happening in Gaza is a genocide is to be an unraveling of a lot of things that they have been told over and over again since they were children. And that is terrifying and disassociating.
Mhm.
I can have compassion for it without feeling like it's okay. I should make that super clear. But my approach to those kinds of people now is different because I understand that there is no amount of throwing facts at them that is going to change their minds.
And as you write in the book, you write about your approach in the context of missionaries coming to your house. And you write, quote, "What is effective is holding space gently and with firm, compassionate boundaries where you can continue to communicate and strengthen ties." So, couple questions. Is that still your approach? And do you think that works with ICE agents and Proud Boys and Holocaust deniers slash supporters at this point?
I think that I try to have that be my approach. That is sort of a core value
Mm-hmm.
while acknowledging that my safety is paramount. The safety of my community is paramount. Not everybody gets to have that space. Sometimes that is the goal, but that is not necessarily what's going to happen every time. And that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to try to hold compassionate space to somebody who is hitting my friend with a fucking pipe, like, no, the time for that is over. But I have been trying to engage more with people who are beginning to question QAnon beliefs or are beginning to try to understand more about trans rights. And even though I find it exasperating on some level, and I definitely limit how long I will actually spend day to day doing this, I do try to hold space and say, that's really interesting. Why do you believe that? Where did that come from? Because by understanding where those threads are weaving themselves together, I can begin to, I guess, snip some of them
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, well, what happens if that's not true? What does that what does that mean to you? Like, how does that make you feel? And like, I don't know. I think it comes from having been a sex worker for a long time, where sometimes you're just like, oh, interesting. This is like a little bit therapy, a little bit sex work. I feel like that's just what I'm doing when it comes to holding space for people who are, for example, evangelicals and not necessarily having my hackles raised when one of them says something that if it was coming from a fellow leftist, I would be like, dude, what the fuck? Saying like, okay, I understand enough of your context to understand that you might not have ever thought about this before. This might just be something that is like a reactionary response that you've never questioned. So let me help you learn how to question it.
Do you have examples or times in your life where that has worked, where you've shifted somebody from what might be some pretty poisonous views into some more rational, compassionate positions because you held space? And before you answer, your dad, I'm not going to accept, yes, my father as an answer. Got to be somebody you're
Yeah.
not biologically related to.
Well, um, actually, I have been mentoring an evangelical teen through possible deconstruction, though I'm not putting any pressure one way or the other.
Mhm.
Um, I met him accidentally on Reddit where he had posted asking, my friends say that I have a cult glaze. What does that mean? Um, and people, it was in the Reddit slash cults. And eventually it came out that he was some flavor of evangelical, and people immediately started making fun of him.
Mhm.
I didn't know he was a teenager at the time. I just saw that there was this person who was asking about this thing seemingly genuinely. And I was like, hey, I think it's really brave of you to come to slash cult to ask about the ways that your religion is influencing how you appear to the world. Like that's huge,
Yeah.
actually. Like, good for you. And he ended up messaging me privately and saying, like, oh, can we talk more about this? Like, and I was like, yeah, okay. And then, like, I don't know, maybe a month in, we were just chatting on Reddit. And a month in, a friend of mine who is an ex-evangelical was like, you should make sure that this isn't a honeypot. Like,
Smart.
you're such a nice, trusting person. You should make sure that this isn't a honeypot who's like looking to fuck you over somehow. And I was like, oh, yeah, I should. So I started looking at his post history and I was like, oh, this is like a teen who loves his dog and loves anime and is grappling with queer feelings and also
Mm.
being evangelical and is maybe kind of a mess. And I was like, okay, we need to set up some boundaries because I am 41. Like, and I need you to know that. I need you to know I cannot know your name. I cannot know where you live. I will not send you money. And you can leave at any time. You can just disappear and never speak to me again. You can block me. That's totally fine. Um, if you are okay with all of that, then we can continue to chat and like learn a little bit. You can learn a little bit about my culture, my experiences as an adult queer person. I can learn more about what it's like living in a homeschooled evangelical household. And we just started bouncing back and forth and talking to him. Like, I was always very judgmental, I think, about evangelicals in general. And I realized very quickly how terrified this kid was. Absolutely terrified. He was convinced that the earth was going to open and swallow him up on his birthday if he did not pray hard enough.
Hmm.
And he was up all night praying and crying and freaking out. He was having night terrors. He couldn't see a doctor for his terrible sleep because his parents didn't believe in that.
Hmm.
And so it was like, oh God, if you're raised like this, I can really easily see how, as soon as you begin to have control over anything, you are desperate to have that control.
Yeah.
You are desperate to have a sense of power over your environment. The idea that you don't have control, that no one's in control, that there is no God, that things just happen randomly and it's chaos, actually, I can understand how that would be deeply unsettling to somebody who was raised in this belief that God is constantly watching you. Like, I can see how it could be a relief, and I can also see how it would be really, really scary to be like, oh, and angering. Like, I've been doing all of this. I've been praying, I've been fasting, I've been giving up on social things and not drinking Starbucks or whatever, like, because I was so convinced that all of these things were evil. And now I'm realizing that actually that was all made up in order to control me. And now I have to reframe my relationship with my parents. Now, no longer is it about I'm a bad kid and I am a failure in God's eyes, but rather, oh, I'm being raised in an environment where everyone believes that this kind of control is normal and it's not. Like, I mean, leaving a cult, it's terrifying. And it's a lot of people who leave a cult will join another cult. And I think that understanding more about that has helped me have more compassion. I mean, I say all this and like that's a very specific circumstance. I do think that happens an awful lot. I also think that there are a lot of particularly men, but not exclusively. There's an awful lot of white women who like doing this too, who just want to be in control
Yeah.
of things and feel like that is their righteous place. They feel like they deserve it on some
Well,
level.
and also at least Americans, many societies, certainly including American society, rewards that, tells them that that's what they should aim for, and then rewards them for achieving it.
Yeah, yeah. There is a spoiled brattiness that I think is really weird to me.
I'm glad you brought up cults because I really want to ask you about, and I'd really love for you to talk to our listeners about your ethical cult experiment, which I found absolutely fascinating.
There's a part of me that really wants to pair up with an academic to write a whole book on this.
And this is in the book, by the way, listeners. If
This
you're
is in the book.
fascinated by this idea, buy the book,
Yeah.
Love Rebels. You can read more about it.
So I, in like, I don't know, I think it was 2018, maybe this started. I had been doing some activism around real name policies for a few years. I had shown up at Google and Facebook, like arguing against real name policies, trying to explain to them how they're harmful. And in that process, I had connected with this techie guy from Google who was really interested in like talking to me more about sex worker rights. And I was like, okay, like, cool. I'm for that. You work at Google. You clearly have resources and are connected to people with resources. That would be super helpful. Um, and we chatted for a while. And in the beginning, it seemed fine, right? Like it seemed like we had the same goals. We wanted to start some kind of like, I mean, sex workers support group, sort of, but also like a way to legitimize sex work in certain contexts and maybe protect against certain types of illegality issues. We're trying to like figure all of that stuff out. And I joked with him, like, oh, we should start an ethical cult. Like, because we can, if we call it a cult up front, then it will cause people to not trust us as leaders inherently because they'll be like, yeah, but they didn't call themselves a cult though. So maybe we should be suspicious. And I want that. I insist on it. I need that kind of accountability. So is it possible to start an ethical cult? A lot of cults start out with seemingly ethical values and then it devolves very quickly. So I was just really curious, like, how do you do that? Are people attracted to the idea of an ethical cult, or is the unethical practices part of the appeal? Which I'm sorry to say, I do think it is kind of part of the appeal. People really want to be told what to do a lot of the time. And this was an experiment, at least when I was involved in not doing that. Anyway, then the pandemic happened, and the person I was working with from Google lost his motherfucking mind. Like, completely went off the deep end, was calling at all hours. Like, he was paying me, but he was not paying me enough for the amount of labor I was doing trying to manage his mental breakdown. I'm pretty sure he was using a lot of substances irresponsibly. I later found out that he was using the group as a way to meet sex workers that he could book and then be crazy and weird with them. And I had a moment where I was like, I've invested a lot of time in this, and I really want to see if it's something I can pull out of this pit that I'm beginning to see. And I'm glad to say I did that fairly early, but I also am glad to say I was doing a lot of research into cults at the time. And I was like, this is that point. Everyone has one. And this is like, either it goes the way I am going to line out as like, I need to have financial records that are transparently posted. I need to speak to a legal representative. I need a lot of things in place to make sure that this is safe, not only for me, but for the other people that have come into this with me. And he didn't want to do any of that. So I was like, peace, I'm out.
Mm.
And I think part of what made me realize that we had different goals at that point was the pandemic had just begun. he suggested that we help out sex workers who were often struggling with, especially because they couldn't work at the time safely, um, getting food on the table. So he wanted to give food away. And I was like, that sounds great. Why don't we work with somebody who already does that? And like, we can just funnel resources their way because they've already got the infrastructure. And he didn't want to do that because he wanted his name on it. And I was like, oh, so this isn't about helping people for you. This is about glory. That is not what this is about for me. I just want to feed people. I don't care if I'm getting credit for it. Like, and that was just like a huge, we're on different vibes here. And so at that point, I said, okay, experiment over. No, you cannot have an ethical cult. I got in contact with everybody involved. It was like, I'm leaving. Here's why. I would highly recommend that you get your bag and go. um,
Did everyone
yeah.
follow you out the door, or is he still out there being creepy?
Uh, he got fired from Google for unrelated stuff. He famously is the guy who went around saying that AI is sentient. Um,
Uh,
yeah, Blake Lemoine. And he was like, yeah, like AI is a sentient being who is like, a child and needs our support and our protection and yada yada yada. And then like in the same breath on his social media was like, I'm gonna start an AI porn company. And I was like, okay. So AI in your mind has the sentience of a 5-year-old and you want to do porn with it. Like that, absolutely not.
I
I
think I
think
think now, granted, I do not have a medical degree, but this smells to me like an example of too much ketamine at one time. That's
yeah.
what
Oh,
it
I
smells
would
like.
not be surprised. I mean, it's rampant in the Bay Area in particular. So, yeah, I think that. I think lack of, you know, mental health care or feeling like he needs it is part of it. Um, but also a white male desire for power and control and feeling like he knows better than other people. He is a guy who genuinely believed God was talking to him.
Do you? And I promise I will not take this personally, because I have a hunch the answer is yes, but I'm curious about your perspective. That desire for recognition, control, and domination, is that something that is just inherent to white, cis, straight men? And by inherent, I don't mean genetics, of course, but just hundreds, if not thousands of years across multiple societies of learned behavior. Is that so deep set that it's a real struggle to overcome that programming, even if you identify as an anarchist, even if you identify as a progressive, even if you're, Zoran and you're about to be mayor of New York, although he's not a white man, but still, like, you still have, as a cis heterosexual man, you have this programming. Is that truly as universal as it feels sometimes?
I don't think it has to be. I
Interesting.
think it is easy for it to be that way. I think, what was it, John Scalzi wrote that piece about straight white male is the easiest difficulty setting. It's
Wait,
like playing video games on the easiest setting.
the sci-fi writer?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
what piece? I love John Scalzi. I didn't know he wrote a piece on this.
Yeah. I believe it's called like straight white male is the easiest difficulty setting. Um,
Oh, I've got to read this. That sounds amazing.
straight white male, the lowest difficulty setting there is. And he wrote this in 2012.
Hmm.
It's fantastic. And I like the way that he frames it as it's not that you're not still playing the game, but you have so many advantages that make it easier for you to play the game than other people have. So it can still be hard
Right.
for various reasons, but you've got all the cheat codes.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think it's an interesting way to look at it in that I don't think it is effective or useful to like blame men for that. But I think it is helpful to encourage that sense of humility and understanding that, like, oh, it is easier for me. Oh, this is kind of given to me in some ways more so than other people.
Mhm.
And I think actually my one of my best friends is a libertarian, and I really appreciate this reframe that she gave me, which was, it's not that I want straight white men to not have these advantages. I want everyone to have them.
But she's a
So I'm not,
libertarian. She doesn't
but
believe
she's a
in
libertarian. I mean,
giving anybody
I know.
anything.
I know. Well, she's thankfully more on the bleeding heart libertarian side, which is why we get along. Um, but like, she is a really good example for me in why it is helpful to have patience with people for whom you don't agree, and it is difficult for you to initially find that agreement, because I have watched her move libertarian men in her communities further towards caring about other people through just consistent patience. And I don't think that everyone has to do this. I don't think everyone can do this. I think this is a form of activism that like some people are especially good at, and especially good at for certain subsections of their communities. Like,
I would love to know, number one, God's work. No
yeah, absolutely.
qualifications, God's work. Full stop. Number two, I would love to know how effective it really is, because I just wonder how many of those guys that have been moved then November 7th vote for Trump anyway.
I have
I
to
just
say,
I would just my gut, going back to like people deciding issues based on their gut, not based on empirical facts. My
absolutely.
gut tells me that guy, while he might decide it's okay to be friends with his gay coworker, or he might decide to not use some horrific anti-trans slur the next time he rides the bus, that guy's still fucking voting for Trump. So how much does it really matter that he's friends with his anti-gay coworker? It is his gay.
I I have been pretty surprised at how, I mean, I don't think she's doing this on purpose, but through her, I have noticed a bunch of libertarians that I have followed no longer identify as libertarians, which has
Really?
made me feel like, hell yeah, get them over to the side. You know?
That's really interesting.
Um, Anecdotes are not data.
Sure.
So, how well this works on a larger scale, I don't know. I will say, if you look at people who were writing about, my family member is a part of QAnon, how do I deal with this? Should I deal with this? Is it okay for me to leave? A lot of that advice is, it is really helpful for people who are in a cult to have connections with people outside of that cult, because it is understandable why people want to drop them and leave them in that soup, in that mess that they've made for themselves. But they're never getting any external information that way. They're never seeing any other points of view. Um, if I had stopped talking to evangelical teen the first time he said something like wildly homophobic, he might still be really struggling. But now he is looking at being 18 and getting out of the house and going to community college, and he has a plan. He's got a license now. He's got friends outside of his church. Like, I was able to hold space for him, and through that, and through gently, and I mean, it's tough love. It's not like you have to just be like, "Oh, I'll just accept anything you say." But I think there was one time where, what was it? Like, maybe I think it was like there were fires happening in LA, and he was like, "Well, my parents say that's just part of God's punishment for,
The Jews and the gays and the blacks and
immorality."
all
Yeah,
the, yeah.
immorality of LA. And I was like, "So some of my friends lost their houses." And he was like, "Oh my God, I don't even know why I said that. Like, I don't know where that came from. I am so sorry." I was like, I understand. Like, I just want you to understand that there's like a human impact when you say things like that. And he was like, yeah, that was fucked up.
Hmm.
And like, because I was able to not yell at him, not shame him, but just reflect back at him, like, this is how that comes across. Is that what you meant? He was able to check himself, and rather than encouraging him to feel ashamed, I encouraged him to learn from it and do better next time. And like, I mean, that's all in my consent culture book. It's all about like understanding that you will fuck up. You will absolutely fuck up. You will fuck up tomorrow. You will fuck up the next day. How you handle that is what really matters.
Yeah.
And you will not always handle it gracefully, but you can learn from that and take accountability and make restitution and do better. I want to give people the chance to do that. So if they determinedly decide not to over and over again, I could be like, I washed my hands of you. I did my best. Like, I really gave you the chance. I gave you the patience. I gave you the opportunity. I gave you the tool set, and you chose violence. So, okay. you know,
I mean, like I said, God bless you, sister. God's work. I couldn't do that. I find it incredibly admirable. I just, yeah, that's not a labor that I could do for any stretch of time. Certainly not without losing my mind. But I tremendously admire you for doing it. We're running up to an hour, and I don't want to take too much of your time. But before you go, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your political beliefs. In the book, you identify as an anarcho-syndicalist. Seeds of Revolution is an anarchist podcast. Canvas is an anarchist bookstore. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how you came to anarchism and, why anarchism when so many people, myself included, I spent, I don't know, 20 years as a socialist activist, or people joined DSA or people joined the RCP and God only knows what else. So what was it about anarchism and anarcho-syndicalism that spoke to you?
I think that I really appreciate, well, I mean, again, my mom was an anarchist, so I was definitely raised with that as a sort of milieu.
What
Um,
what
I
what what flavor of anarchism?
I think she would have identified as a true anarchist, like 'cause she was somebody who like I wouldn't say proudly, but very bluntly would say, I identify as true neutral, which is a wild and possibly sociopathic thing to say. Um, but like I really was raised with a belief that it is better to show people a better path than it is to make them take it.
Mm.
And so for me, anarchy feels like the closest to that. Um, I disagree with other anarchists all the time. But in general, I feel like enough of our values are aligned that I feel more at home there than anywhere else. I particularly get on with, I mean, not just anarchists, but other leftists who have like an optimism, a sort of aggressive optimism. I think that's why I get along with my libertarian friend. She has an aggressive optimism in people.
Mm.
And that's something I connect a lot to. So I don't follow libertarianism because I find libertarian men in particular to be absolutely insufferable, and I do not want to spend any time with them.
They really are
In,
they really are.
in general, there are some that are fine, and then they usually several years later decide they're not libertarians. Um, shout out Vermin Supreme. But like, I feel like there is, I think with socialism and communism, those have both been the organizations that do that work. I think they do helpful and interesting work. I do not want to sit through that many meetings. I do not want to argue. Again, I don't want to argue with men about theory. That is not interesting to me. I want to do something about stuff. And I will say I am a proud Wobbly member as well. Like, I fully believe in like unions, and I am a part of the freelancer union of journalists. So like, I'm sort of collie, I guess, when it comes to my leftism, but I appreciate anarcho-syndicalism in particular because there is this understanding that people like organization in some level, and it takes a lot of work to find a way to do that in a fair way. Um, I think it helps that it hasn't really been a, like, I don't know, an organizing principle for a nation. So I don't have to be like, oh, that's disappointing. Um, I could see a time where I might have been more inclined to have a lot more faith in like socialism or communism, but I did spend time in Eastern Europe, and that really made me nervous about how this stuff manifests. The ideals can be good, but the way that it becomes reality is sometimes concerning. So, like, I guess it's kind of easy in a way because it hasn't really happened for anarchy. So you can kind of have the optimism because it hasn't really been a thing yet.
We
So
have
we can
still have
hope that it would work.
we still have the freedom to make it whatever we want to make it.
Absolutely. And I think that it's very adaptable in a way that I appreciate. That there is kind of an understanding that it is an ideal rather than an organizing principle per se. Like, I don't think that an anarchist society would really work without so much unpacking and training and therapy and resources that I think a lot of the world would have to die first. I don't really want to see that happen. So I kind of have to accept that that might just be the ideal to strive towards rather than a thing that will happen. Um, I identify as an anarchist, and I think the welfare state is important. That's because I have to be realistic about the world that I live in. And unlike the libertarians I know, I don't believe that corporations are going to take care of disabled people or poor people or old people. So we have to have things in place for that. So that's kind of like, I sort of saw a lot of like, well, not really that. And nah, I don't really like a lot of the people in that. And you know what? I'm just going to do this because I can kind of do this on my own. And I can organize with all these other groups, but I don't have to subscribe 100% to any of it, which is kind of how I was raised religiously, too, where I could just sort of sample everything and be like, this is cool. I'll throw that in there.
I mean, anarchy is the paganism of political ideologies, so it does make
Yeah. For good and ill,
sense.
frankly.
Exactly. Sometimes
Yeah, I
it's a good
mean,
thing, and sometimes it's pretty terrible.
I want to be an anarchist who is very open to critique and finds that a fun way to improve my understanding rather than something I can beat other people over the head with.
Well, Kitty, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and to appear on Seeds of Revolution. The book is Love Rebels: How I Learned to Burn It Down Without Burning Out by Kitty Stryker. It will be out on October 17th, published by Thorn Apple Press. Kitty, thank you so much for being on Seeds of Revolution. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
And good luck on the book sales. We will be carrying it at Camus, so stop by after October 17th and make sure to pick up a
And
copy.
Jesus Christ came back today like you threatened he will. Which poor group of people do you think that he would kill? And who would Jesus choose to starve if you gave him the chance? And if there was a genocide, would he take a neutral stance? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would he say that some people, they just deserve to die? If Jesus Christ rose from the dead and on a sidewalk slept, would you extend your hand to him or just watch where you stepped? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus hate the gay folk, the queer folk, or the trans? Would he suggest they end their lives according to God's plans? Would Jesus tell a homeless man to get a fucking job, or turn his back on the poor? Would Jesus be a snob? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus build a border wall? Would Jesus drive a tank? Would Jesus be a landlord? Would Jesus run a bank? Would Jesus Christ feel safe in his skin if he came to your town? And would you still believe in him if you found out he was brown? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Yeah, who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well,